The power of becoming emotionally cold. There comes a point in life where being overly emotional stops serving you. You care too much, give too much, react too much every time. It drains you. You keep hoping that your empathy will be returned, that people will treat you the way you treat them. But the harsh truth, most won't. They'll take what you give and leave you empty. That's where emotional coldness steps in, not as a weakness, but as a weapon. Becoming emotionally cold doesn't mean shutting down your humanity. It means controlling the thermostat, knowing when to feel and when to turn it off. It's about protecting your mind from chaos. It's the ability to pause, stay silent, and think instead of react. Because when you stop reacting emotionally, you start playing the game differently. You stop being predictable. And in a world built on manipulation, that's power. Emotional coldness creates distance, and distance creates respect. When people can't read you, they can't use you. They don't know where to push, so they stop pushing. Suddenly, your silence says more than your words ever could. You become untouchable not because you're numb, but because you've mastered your feelings. Look at the moments that hurt the most. Look at the times you were betrayed, overlooked, taken for granted. Now ask yourself, was it your kindness that failed, or your lack of boundaries? Emotional coldness is the boundary. It's the moment you stop begging for validation. You stop needing anyone to understand you. You move in silence, and people start to wonder. They feel the absence of your emotion like a storm before the silence. This isn't about becoming heartless. It's about becoming strategic. When you let emotions lead, you make mistakes. You chase what walks away. You over-explain, over-promise, overextend. But when you detach, you move like a shadow, unaffected, unreadable, unshakable. You start to see things as they are, not as your heart wants them to be. You stop hoping someone will change. You stop needing closure. You stop explaining yourself to people who never deserved access to your thoughts in the first place. Coldness gives you clarity. Clarity gives you power. People respect what they can't control. They admire what they can't predict. Emotional coldness removes the leash from your neck and puts it in your hands. You're no longer a prisoner to impulse, to approval, to emotional chaos. You respond only when it serves you. You choose where your energy goes. And most importantly, you don't apologize for that. The world doesn't reward softness. It rewards control. Every time you bite your tongue instead of snapping. Every time you stay silent instead of venting your anger. Every time you walk away without a word. You're building presence. You're becoming dangerous not because you're loud, but because you're composed. The truth is, emotional coldness isn't about feeling less. It's about feeling later when it's safe. When it's wise, when it serves you, not weakens you. It's the difference between a reaction and a decision, between chaos and control, between weakness and power. And when you learn to walk through the fire without flinching, when nothing rattles your frame or shakes your focus, you become untouchable. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop explaining and start You move from noise to precision, because now your presence speaks louder than your emotions ever did. And people notice. They don't know why, but they feel it. You're harder to manipulate, harder to get, harder to shake. You say less, do more, and reveal nothing. That mystery becomes your strength. That silence becomes your edge. Suddenly, you're not the one waiting for closure. You are the closure. You're not begging to be understood. You understand yourself, and that's more than enough. You stop arguing with fools. You stop proving your worth to people who only value you when you're easy to use. Emotional coldness gives you back the energy you used to waste on the wrong people and the wrong battles. It makes you dangerous in the best way possible, because now your actions come from thought, not from feeling. You're not reactive, you're calculated. You don't give second chances lightly. You don't explain your standards. You enforce them with silence, with distance, with restraint. This is where real power lives. Not in shouting, not in proving, but in being unfazed. A cold mind isn't bitter, it's focused. It sees through the noise, the lies, the manipulation. And once you've tasted that kind of clarity, you can never go back to emotional chaos. People will say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're cold, but what they really mean is they can't control you anymore. They don't have access to your emotions, and that scares them. They miss the version of you that overgave, overshared, overloved, but that version of you had no armor. That version got burned. This version is bulletproof. Not because you don't care, but because now you care correctly. You protect your energy like your life depends on it. You choose who gets access to your mind, your time, your heart. You've learned that not everyone deserves your warmth, that not everyone can handle your truth. And now, you've stopped bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You've stopped setting yourself on fire just to keep others warm. That version of you is gone. Not bitter, not broken, just evolved. See, emotional coldness isn't about turning your heart to stone. It's about turning your mind into a fortress. You feel everything, but you respond to almost nothing. Because not every situation deserves your energy. Not every insult needs a comeback. Not every loss is worth grieving out loud. You've learned the discipline of emotional detachment. You no longer base your decisions on how you feel in the moment to base them on what moves you forward. That's what separates strength from sensitivity. You can still love, still care, still build deep connections. But now, it's on your terms. Not desperation, not fear of being alone, not emotional neediness disguised as connection. People who live in chaos won't understand you anymore. They'll say you've lost your heart, but you haven't. You've just placed it behind walls that require respect to enter. You've stopped making yourself easy to reach for people who never once reached back. And now, something strange starts to happen. The more emotionally cold you become, the more emotionally free you feel. You're no longer drained by every little problem. You're no longer chained to people who once had power over your mood. You stop checking your phone, hoping someone texted back. You stop reliving arguments in your head, hoping you'd said something different. Instead, you become present, focused, clear. You sleep better, think sharper, move faster. And the silence that once felt like punishment, it now feels like peace. Because now, you know how rare your energy is, how dangerous your peace is, and how powerful it is to no longer need permission to feel strong. You don't seek revenge. You don't seek closure. You just rise and keep rising. Quietly, relentlessly. And every time someone expects the old version of you, though, one who would have cracked, cried, or chased, they're met with nothing but silence. Cold.com. Unshaken, and in that silence, they realize they lost access to something they once took for granted. The old you, that was the version who the one who let others walk in and out of your life, like it was a revolving door. That version needed to be liked, needed to be understood, needed to be heard, but now, you understand something far more valuable. Peace is more important than proving a point. Dignity is more important than being right. And distance-controlled, intentional distance is more powerful than any loud reaction. You've mastered the art of walking away not with bitterness, but with indifference. And that indifference, that unshakable calm, that's the scariest thing to anyone who once thought they had emotional power over you. Because now, you're not angry, you're not emotional, you're done. And that done is what people never see coming. This version of you doesn't chase, doesn't cling, doesn't seek revenge. It simply disconnects. Quietly, permanently. And that silence becomes louder than any argument, any closure, any apology. Emotional coldness teaches you to stop begging, stop explaining, stop watering dead plants. You no longer try to convince someone of your worth. You just show it by who you allow into your space. And who you don't. You don't return to chaos just because it feels familiar. You don't reply to guilt trips, disguised as love. You don't argue with people committed to misunderstanding you. You simply rise calm, focused, emotionless on the surface, but deeply intentional beneath it. You're not numb. You've just evolved past the point of needing external validation to feel whole. Because once you've tasted the power of peace, once you've lived days without emotional roller coasters, drama, or once you've sat alone and felt full instead of empty, you start to realize emotional coldness isn't a flaw, it's a filter that protects your mind, guards your soul, and lets through only what truly deserves to stay. And when that filter is in place, everything changes. You stop tolerating you stop entertaining low vibration energy. You no longer feel obligated to maintain relationships built on guilt, familiarity, or obligation. You see the world differently, sharper, clearer, cleaner. You see through manipulation masked as love, through fake apologies laced with control, through attention disguised as care. The illusions fall away, and what's left is truth, cold, raw, and liberating. You stop being everyone's emotional punching bag. You stop saving people who refuse to save themselves. You no longer feel guilty for putting yourself first, because now you know you can't pour from an empty cup. And you sure as hell don't refill that cup by sacrificing your sanity for people who would unflinch if you disappeared. This mindset makes you rare, makes you misunderstood, but it also makes you powerful. Because the more emotionally cold you become, the more you build a life that doesn't need to be constantly defended or explained. You don't chase peace anymore. You create it. Through solitude, through razor-sharp boundaries, and a brutally clear understanding of what you will and will not allow into your life. There's no more room for small talk, fake smiles, or surface-level connections. Now, it's either real or it's gone. Deep or deleted. Mutual or irrelevant. You don't speak much, you don't react quickly, and that makes people nervous. Because they can't tell if you're calm or calculating, forgiving or finished. But that's the point. Let them wonder. Let them overthink. Let them feel the weight of your absence. You've already decided, in silence, with peace, without a single wasted word. Because now, you don't prove your value. You are the value, and your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. You've become the storm that doesn't need to thunder, the silence that speaks louder than noise, the presence that shifts a room without raising your voice. And when people realize they no longer have access to you, they also realize the depth of what they lost. Because true emotional strength isn't found in how loudly you fight for something. It's found in how calmly you can walk away from what no longer serves you. You don't chase peace, love, or respect anymore. You embody it. And when it's not reflected back, you don't argue. You disappear, quietly, efficiently, without apology. That's the power of emotional coldness. It's not a defense mechanism, it's a standard. It says, if your energy disturbs my clarity, I won't fight you, I'll just remove you. It says, my time is currency, and my emotion is investment. If you're not worth both, you get neither. It says, I'm not avoiding emotions, I'm mastering them, and mastering them means using them, not being used by them. This mindset doesn't make you heartless. It makes you focused. It makes you dangerous. Because now, you don't react, you observe. You don't explain, you decide. You don't get pulled into storms, you watch them pass, untouched. You become a man or a woman of presence. Not noise, discipline over drama, power over pity, strategy over sympathy. And the moment you realize that your silence is more powerful than your scream, the moment you understand that self-control is more lethal than revenge, the moment you feel the peace of not caring what doesn't serve you, that's when you step into a level of power that's rare. A level where fewer people can reach you, and even fewer can affect you. Because now, your energy is no longer available for random access. It's earned, not assumed. Protected, not poured out. You're no longer in the business of convincing anyone of your worth. You simply are, and that's enough. You walk into rooms without needing to be seen. You speak without needing to be heard. You exist in your own frame, anchored, grounded, unshaken by noise, drama, or desperation. And in that stillness, there's danger. Because emotional coldness isn't about having less to feel. It's about having more control over what you let affect you. And the ones who once saw you as too emotional, too intense, or too much, now they'll say you've changed, that you've become distant, maybe even cruel. But the truth is, you just stopped leaking energy. You stopped negotiating your standards. You stopped being emotionally accessible to those who only valued you when you were easy to use. You are no longer emotionally cheap. Everything about you now comes with a cost. Your attention, your affection, your time, your peace. You don't give these things freely anymore. Not because you're cold by nature, but because you've learned. The price of being warm in a world that feeds off your fire is too high to keep paying. So now, you sit in silence, in control, observing more, saying less, moving with intention. The version of you that once overshared, overcommitted, and overcared is long gone. This new version doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to defend, doesn't need to prove. This version is dangerous because nothing owns you anymore, not their praise, not their rejection, not their silence, not their chaos. And when nothing owns you, you become impossible to control. You become truly free, free from emotional blackmail, free from passive aggression, free from the invisible strings that once pulled your reactions like a puppet on command. Now, your value isn't up for debates. You no longer overstay where you're taught. You don't try to be understood in spaces that thrive on misunderstanding. You don't beg for clarity from people who benefit from your confusion. You've turned your back on the emotional roulette that once dictated your days. Now, you move on, facts not feelings, intent not impulse, discipline not drama, and it shows. In how you speak, in how you move, in what you allow. You've stopped running toward what walks away. You've stopped waiting for people to choose you, fix you, or see your worth. Because you chose yourself, you rebuilt. And now, you see clearly. You see who adds value and who only brings noise. You see who supports and who only drains. You see who deserves access and who's permanently locked out. And no, you don't hate anyone. You're not bitter. You're not angry. You've simply elevated. You've upgraded your emotional operating system. What once triggered you now bores you. What once broke you now reveals who still hasn't grown. You realize emotional coldness isn't the absence of feeling. It's the presence of power. Your peace, your precision. And when the world realizes they can't shake you anymore, when silence becomes your sharpest response, when your presence feels like pressure and your absence feels like a punishment, that's when you know you didn't just become emotionally cold. You became untouchable. Not because you built walls to hide behind, but because you built standards no one crosses without respect. You no longer hand out pieces of yourself to anyone with a smile or a sob story. You've learned to listen without absorbing, to observe without engaging, and to walk away without explaining. That's the final form of emotional coldness. Not anger, not detachment, but calm, calculated presence. You become the one who controls the room without needing to raise your voice. You draw the line without saying a word. And here's the truth. Most people, 1T, admit emotional coldness is what separates the average from the elite, the distracted from the focused, the easily shaken from the immovable, because the ones who mastered this energy, they don't crumble under pressure. They don't beg to be chosen. They don't get played. They choose themselves every time. They trust silence over noise, logic over impulse, long-term peace over short-term pleasure. You've become the man or the woman who doesn't flinch. You don't engage with every invitation to chaos. You don't defend yourself to people who are already made up their minds. You don't run from loneliness because you've learned that solitude is a sanctuary, not a punishment. And in that stillness, something powerful grows. Discipline, clarity, presence. So when you walk in, people feel the shift, not because you're trying to be seen, but because you've stopped chasing visibility. You've become comfortable in the shadows, confident enough to let your results speak for you. You're no longer desperate to be liked. You'd rather be respected. And if neither comes, you're at peace with being feared. Because when your emotions no longer control you, when your silence becomes your shield, when your energy is guarded like treasure, you stop being accessible. And you start being legendary. Not because you shouted the loudest, but because you moved with ruthless precision. Because you mastered the one thing most people never do yourself. No more running on emotion. No more making decisions from weakness. No more explaining yourself to people who don't even respect themselves. Now, your energy is rare. Your time is expensive. Your peace is non-negotiable. You don't need validation. You are the validation. You don't chase closure. You are the closure. You don't beg for loyalty. You command it by how little you tolerate. And when people look at you now, they can feel it. The distance, the discipline. You're calm, but not passive. You're quiet, but never weak. You're cold but calculated. And that kind of presence? It's unforgettable. It leaves a mark. Because most people expect you to come back, to react, to feel, but you don't. You've trained yourself to withhold, to protect, to preserve. Not everyone deserves access to you. Not everyone can handle the version of you that doesn't flinch, that doesn't respond to manipulation, guilt, or pressure. Because this version is strategic, grounded, unshakable. You've embraced emotional coldness, not as a defense, but as a lifestyle, a necessary evolution in a world that preys on the overly available, where attention is currency, where reaction is control. And now, you move like a ghost in a world full of noise. Calm, collected, calculated. You don't announce your next step. You become it. Because when you stop being emotionally available to the wrong people, you start becoming dangerously powerful to the right ones will notice. Not because you begged for their attention, but because your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. You see, emotional coldness separates the crowd. It filters out the weak connections, the shallow attachments, the empty words. It repels the ones who only came for comfort, and it attracts those who come with intention. When you carry yourself with that kind of restraint, people either rise to your level or fall out of your life. And you're fine with either. Because now, you don't fear loss. You fear wasted energy. You fear being pulled back into old patterns, old habits, old versions of yourself. That version is gone. And this one doesn't entertain chaos. The old you would argue. The new you lets the silence do the talking. The old you odd explained your boundaries. The new you just enforces them with distance and discipline. And the moment someone tries to test your peace, they find out it's not just a muditsa line they cannot cross. Emotional coldness means you've retired from trying to fix broken people. You've stopped auditioning for temporary roles in other people's stories. You've outgrown the need to be seen, heard, or even understood. Now, you operate from purpose, from power, from principle, and every move you make is intentional. Every word you say carries weight. Every silence you offer leaves a void that speaks for itself. You're no longer accessible to people who drain you. You're no longer responsive to chaos, disguised as connection. You've become selective ruthlessly so, because you finally understand. You are the prize. You are the peace. You are the standard. And if someone can't meet you there, they don't belong anywhere near your life. So you continue, cold, focused, elevated, not because you lost your heart, but because you finally learned to protect it. And the higher you climb in this state of control and clarity, the fewer people can reach you, and the fewer you want to. And that's the real shift. When your standards rise so high, your tolerance for anything less disappears. You stop needing crowds, approval, or constant conversation. You realize peace doesn't come from being surrounded, it comes from being centered. And emotional coldness gives you that center. Solid, unmoved, clear. You no longer chase connections. You attract alignment. You no longer seek comfort. You seek clarity, and most importantly, you no longer fear being alone. Because now, your solitude is your strength, not your punishment. You've turned quiet into power, distance into discipline, control into calm. And when people ask what changed, they won't understand. Because they didn't see the nights you were burning out for people who never once lit a flame for you. They didn't feel the weight of being emotionally available to everyone but yourself. They didn't hear the noise you had to silence just to breathe. Now, you breathe easy. Not because life got lighter, but because you did. You dropped the baggage, the expectations, the emotional debt. You learned how to let people go without anger, without drama, without explanation. You stopped arguing. You stopped chasing. You stopped bleeding for people who never planned to heal with you. And from that moment on, something changed in your eyes. Not dead, not numb, just done. Done explaining, done proving, done making yourself smaller just to keep others comfortable. You walk with silence, now with precision, with unbothered strength, because when emotional coldness becomes your nature, you're no longer in the game of being understood. You're in the game of being undeniable. And from here on out, it's your rules. Your peace, your world. The ones who get it will rise to meet you. The rest will fade, quietly, just like you always knew they would. And when they fade, you won't flinch. Because you're no longer attached to potential, you're anchored in reality. You no longer fantasize about who someone could be. You watch who they consistently are. And when their actions don't match your standards, you don't argue. You exit. That's the power of emotional coldness. It gives you the gift of detachment without the poison of bitterness. You don't wish them harm. You simply remove your energy, your presence, your value, and you never look back. You're not seeking revenge. You're seeking results. You're not holding grudges. You're holding your frame. You're not too cold. You're just no longer emotionally available to inconsistency. And that, in this world of impulsive emotion and shallow connection, is dangerous. Because now, you pause before reacting. You observe before engaging. You decide before responding. And in that pause, that space between feeling and action, lives your power. You've outgrown the chaos. You've outgrown emotional entanglements. You've outgrown everything that pulls you away from discipline, focus, and peace. You are no longer for everyone. You're no longer everywhere. You've become rare, and rare things are never easily touched. So now you walk alone, but never lonely. You speak less, but say more. You give less, but what you give matters. And if someone can't recognize the strength it took to become this composed, to remain this still, this quiet, this selective, then they were never meant to stand next to the version of you that rose from the ashes. Because this version of you doesn't beg, doesn't break, doesn't bend. It simply builds in silence, in focus. Full control not just of your surroundings, but of yourself. And that's the final level most never reach, because it's not found in external success, attention, or validation. It's found in the stillness, the silence, the moments no one sees when you choose discipline over emotion, solitude over noise, purpose over pleasure. You've stopped trying to be everything to everyone. You've stopped spreading yourself thin to feel worthy. You've realized your presence is the value, and your absence is the lesson. And now, people feel the difference. You don't rush replies. You don't force connections. You don't explain your silence because it speaks for itself. That's the edge. That's the power of becoming emotionally cold. You've become immune to guilt trips, blind loyalty, and emotional manipulation. You see the games before they start. You sense the energy before words are spoken. You're not trying to be right anymore. You're trying to stay unsure. You're not chasing apologies. You're chasing alignment. You're not here to prove anything. You're here to build everything. The mind is sharper. The emotions are deeper but reserved. The standards are higher. And the tolerance is gone. You walk with intention. You love with boundaries. You speak with weight. And when you leave, there's no second chance. Because once you've learned to live without what once destroyed you, once you've thrived in your own silence, once you've tasted the calm that comes after the storm you survived, there's no going back. No more performing, no more pretending. No more tolerating anything that costs your peace. This is the new standard. Cold, but calm, detached, but decisive. Quiet, but undeniably powerful. Because now, everything you do is intentional. No wasted movement. No wasted words. No wasted emotion. You no longer fight for closure. You create it. You no longer beg for love. You embody it. You no longer fear being misunderstood. You choose it. When silence serves you better than small talk, that SDE, not louder, not angrier, not more aggressive, just clearer, sharper, colder, because warm hands got burned too many times trying to fix what was never theirs to carry. You've learned emotional coldness isn't the absence of empathy. It's the presence of discipline. It's empathy turned inward. It's giving yourself everything you used to hand out so carelessly. You used to overgive. You used to chase. You used to make excuses for their behavior. Now, you observe, you assess, you cut off access, and you feel nothing about it. Not because you don't care, but because you've stopped bleeding for people who would uneven flinch if it was you on the floor. This is where the world starts to notice. Not because you're screaming for attention, but because your silence gets louder with every move you don't make. You're the calm in a world of noise. the stillness in a sea of reaction, the edge they never saw coming. And the more you master this state, this emotionally cold clarity, the more you separate from the world you once tried so hard to fit into. Because now, you're not just surviving, you're building. And nothing gets in the way of that mission anymore. Because when you reach this level, everything becomes intentional. Your time is guarded, your circle is small, your focus is sharp, and your peace, untouchable. You don't tolerate energy leaks. You don't explain what doesn't need to be explained. You don't try to repair what someone else keeps breaking. You used to get pulled into chaos just to keep the peace. Now, you let chaos collapse without you. You used to feel guilty for saying no. Now, you say it without flinching. You used to seek understanding. Now, you walk away when it's not given freely. That's the cold edge. Your heart still works, but your threshold for disrespect doesn't. You don't forgive repeated offenses. You don't entertain the same excuses. You don't reward inconsistency with more of your time. And what you've built in this cold silence is a new code of living. You respond to alignment, not attention. You choose respect over attachment. You value peace over people and you've learned that sometimes choosing yourself will look like betrayal to those who only benefited from yourself. Let them call you cold. Let them call you distant. Let them wonder why you changed, because you did. You evolved. You chose clarity over chaos, power over pity, execution over emotion. And in doing so, you became the rarest kind of dangerous. Not the one who reacts, but the one who never needs to. So you keep building, quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically, because now everything you touch, every room you walk into, every word you choose to speak, every action you take carries weight. Because you're not just cold, you're calculated. And calculated men don't lose, they only decide what's worth winning.